Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing today in the book of Psalms and Psalm 49. We're going to finish up Psalm 49, then we're going to go on to 50. Let's read through Psalm 49 right away. So we remember where we were. In the Psalms, I think it's particularly useful to read from the beginning of the Psalm again if we're cut off in the middle. A Psalm for the sons of Korah. Hear this, all ye people, give ear, all ye inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor, together. My mouth shall speak of wisdom, and the meditation of my heart shall be of understanding. I will incline my ear to a parable. I will open my dark saying upon the harp. Wherefore should I fear in the day of evil, in the days of evil? Wherefore should I fear in the days of evil? When the iniquity of my heels shall compass me about, they that trust in their wealth and boast themselves in the multitude of their riches, none of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. I forgot my scroller's back. For the redemption of their soul is precious, and it ceaseth forever. That he should still... It's hard to read this because it's not translated well. For the redemption of their soul is precious, and it ceaseth forever. You only got a limited supply. Only got a limited time. Or whatever, The cost is endless, or something like that. Like, it's priceless, That's why it ceaseth forever. There's no end to the cost. That he should still live forever, and not see corruption. For he seeth that wise men die. Likewise the fool and the brutish person perisheth, and leave their wealth to others. Their inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever. Lost it there. All right, scroller's back, Paul. You can use it. And their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. Nevertheless, man being in honor abideth not. He is like the beasts that perish. This their way is their folly, yet their posterity approve their sayings. Selah. This is their foolishness, their folly is their way. I didn't really comment on that clause, but it's pretty it could do with commenting, but not with explanation, right? Like sheep they are laid in the grave. Death shall feed on them, and the upright shall have dominion over them in the morning, and their beauty shall consume in the grave from their dwelling. But God will ransom my soul from the power of the grave, for he shall receive me. Selah. Be not thou afraid when one is made rich, when the glory of his house is increased? For when he dieth, he shall carry nothing away. His glory shall not descend after him. Though while he lived, he blessed his soul, and men will praise thee. And men will praise thee when thou doest well to thyself. He shall go to the generation of his fathers. They shall never see light. Man that is in honor and understandeth not is like the beasts that perish. And that's the dark saying. That's the dark parable. When I was talking about the idea of a dark saying, dark parable. What does it mean? Is it something that people don't see? It's a wisdom. The dark wisdom is a wisdom that is hidden from whoever is relative to it. Sometimes it's hidden from everyone. That's like a revelation. If God were to give someone wisdom that no one sees, but that's usually not the case. Oftentimes, wisdom is garden variety. There's an obvious wisdom. You should consider your soul. It's a precious thing. Jesus said, "What will a man give in exchange for his soul?" The psalmist says, though a rich man give everything, he can't give ransom for his brother. He can't. His brother I don't wonder if that isn't just metaphorically like your own soul, your pal, your best pal, your closest friend, your brother. The friend that sticks closer than a brother, your own soul, whatever. Like I said, that's just a musing of my own. But anyways, the point is you can't rescue your brother and you can't save yourself either. So he says, God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave. That confidence. That's what the evangelists, they say, do you know for sure that if you died tonight, you will go to heaven? That question, sorry, I should mute it. I'm going to do it right now. Hold on. Because one good long one there, I think we're feeling better here. My sinuses seem much improved. I just feel like, with big nostrils like that, you should be able to breathe. So, but God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave. God will that, and the focus of our lives should be having that. How do I get the assurance? Where I was talking about, I'm given just this life, and I have such a precious gift given to me, having a living soul, because there are dead souls. I mean, there's a twin brother of mine who's almost exactly like me, different soul. In fact, there might be an infinite. I could have triplets, quadruplets. God could duplicate me and never come up with the same soul twice, as far as I can tell, because twins don't share the same consciousness. You know what I mean? To be a living soul, to me, implies being a distinct individual living consciousness, because twins have differing souls. There's something different about them. It's not, they have a different consciousness, a different individual, they are different individuals, and they have individuality as characteristics of themselves. I mean, not that it's some deep thing to say. I mean, we all know this. But the point is, there's no real limit to the number of times you could duplicate yourself and come up with a different person. It's not like you're going to pop up again. We have no idea how blessed we are to be living souls under God's care. And we don't appreciate it properly because the challenges that God has set us before us, some of us are just like, well, I don't want to. I don't like what God has set before me. And I reject God, and I live my own life. And people are free to do that. And they have their reward. The things they crave out of life that they pursue, whether it be the praise of men, the deceitfulness of riches, the lust of the flesh. If you crave those things, go ahead, go have them, have your fill. You will, you may be scheduled to die. Have your fill. And you have your reward. Everything you're ever going to get out of that, you now have. You have the pleasure you wanted. You know what I mean? You have whatever it was that your soul craved. It's yours now. But your soul is not yours. It never will be. We need a ransom from the grave. You know what I mean? If you can't understand the subtler and the greater pleasures that come from living right and doing right by others, you're probably not fitted for it anyways. I don't know. Some people are not fit for the kingdom. And I don't know. God converts sinners. And, I don't know what to say when he just decides, no, we won't bother this time. The lake of fire for them. And people will listen to that and they'll scoff. And they can go away and scoff, and that's fine. Those, if any man will hear, let him hear. If he will forbear, let him forbear. That's what the scriptures say. Sometimes it affects some people differently than others, and at different times. But with impending dooms, hovering over all of us, we ought to have our minds somewhat brought into focus on the notion of, is there any way to address this? Is it possible? Because people just accept the inevitability of death. Well, there's a lot of ways you can accept the inevitability of death. Because I mean, because for some people that means, well, just fold your hands, do nothing. You're gonna die, so there's no point in putting any effort into your life, because it's all for nothing. It's like, well, without regard to an afterlife, there's also the you could just say, well, I'm gonna live it to the maximum. I'm gonna take my body, I'm gonna use it, and I'm gonna make sure when I die, I'm as healthy as a horse, a healthy horse. I'm as healthy as a healthy horse. Like that I'm strong. The funny thing is you see old horses in movies, and apparently horses aren't always so healthy. All right. It's such a funny colloquialism, if that's the proper term. Healthy as a horse is actually a simile. Yeah. But anyways, or an analogy, actually. But, you can live your life that way. But, and both could be said in accepting because let's say someone's an atheist and they run every day to the end of their life, to be healthy to the end of their life. That's not an unreasonable approach to accepting the inevitability of death. Okay. So it doesn't, when you say that, it doesn't, because some people will say, well, religion is for people who are afraid of dying. No, I think it's for people who accept that they will die and have looked around at reality and considered the possibility that an intelligence is behind it, and that an intelligence has a purpose for us being here, and that our moral choices are probably the most important thing we do. That the way we treat each other, as Jesus said, the greatest commandment is love the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. The first commandment. But after that, it is love thy neighbor as thyself. And if you don't fulfill those, especially when you are tempted, there are times when we are tempted to hate our neighbor, I suppose. I don't know. I've never had, well, I'll tell you what. I've had ex-neighbors, people I used to live nearby, really pissed me off, I gotta say. But I don't know. I tolerated him. I didn't go after him. So is that, I probably should have said, I don't know, maybe love would have been a harsh rebuke. If I'd loved him more, I would have rebuked him harshly, actually, if I think back on it. I would have spoken up and said, listen, buddy, you're going to get yourself in trouble doing things like that. But instead I just kind of smiled and was just burning inside. And I thought probably in myself that was the, whatever, I didn't think is this good or bad to do? It was just the polite thing to do, I think is what I did. And I probably should have done the extremely rude thing, which is speak my mind. Not in a way that's harmful, but in a way that is sort of positive for them, which sometimes is a sharp rebuke. We are living with life and death. The choices we make have consequences. You want to seek out riches? The deceitfulness of riches, the lust of the flesh, all those things. The praise of men, that's another one. The praise of men, that's what the Pharisees were all about. They wanted to be seen by people. They wanted the praises of men. They had appearances to keep up. But inwardly, Jesus knew what they were really like. Full of extortion and excess. Because it was like you do the routine, you honor God and do all these things, and somehow it's acceptable to behave like a... I almost said cretin, which is funny because that's a biblical stereotype. The Bible's talking about... Paul talks about, you say, you people have a saying that the Cretans are always always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. The Cretans. That's why we say Cretan, and he's, and obviously, sometimes those generalities are true. Sometimes we have cultural flaws. People say, and people say, people, just like when they used to talk about Americans in Europe. Now, it doesn't mean that every American who came to Europe at some point was putting ketchup on their filet mignon or whatever. I don't know. But, there's some sort of reputation we establish, and it's not based on nothing. It's based on behavior of other people like us. I forgot why I was even talking about stereotypes. Oh, it's the Cretans. Whatever. And that was because of the behavior of people. Okay. So we won't get carried away on the sidetrack of talking about Cretans and stereotypes. But when we die, we have a God to reckon with. That's the point. That's the whole point. And if you want to live instead of dying, there is a hidden wisdom, a dark wisdom. Jesus said, Paul said it in 1 Corinthians chapter, was it 2 or 3? I forgot it. Again, I forget my references because I reference this a lot. We speak the wisdom of the blankety blank of God, which God hath hidden in a mystery. No, the wisdom of God, which God hath, the hidden wisdom which God hath hidden in a mystery. Whatever. Yeah, we speak that hidden wisdom. But the point is not so much what it's labeled. It's like dark wisdom, hidden wisdom, whatever. That's not the point. The point is that the idea was that the princes of this world, if they had known this hidden wisdom, they would not have crucified Jesus. Because, again, though they fear not, neither God nor men, like the unjust judge, the princes of this world, they do consider their own self-interest. And it is not in their own self-interest to crucify the Son of God. And knowing that, if they had known what was really going on, that wisdom would have occurred to them. But they didn't have it because they were blind. It was hidden. So the thought of it doesn't occur. And so also there's this is a dark wisdom too. Because people just make a lot of time getting rich and spend a lot of time amassing wealth, and it's a trap. And people get rich and they increase the glory of their house. And also, here's the thing, be now not afraid when one is made rich. People always get so jealous and afraid. This is one of the things why I do not freak out about rich people. I don't hate billionaires, though sometimes, they do things they shouldn't do, right? I mean, I'll be critical of them, but it's not the money the money, God is going to give people a lot of money. Some people are going to be given a lot of money, and that's the temptation to become corrupt in that, of course, is going to be irresistible virtually. And so, it's going to be, people are going to have a lot of money, and they're going to be corrupted by it. Or they'll be corrupt before they get it, because, chances of that are pretty high also. Chances of being corrupted after you get the money is pretty high. Really, really, really high. Pretty much absolute. And and the chances you were corrupt before you got the money were, at least 50-50. At least 50-50, right? So people, they get a hold of that money. Yeah. And people get worried about, they're made rich. And there's a certain jealousy. Now, not that there isn't something in society to be done, meaning each person has to contribute according to their means, and they should pay their fair share, as everyone else pays. And that's the thing is like, man, people, the poor, they say, the poor don't pay anything. They don't pay a lot of income taxes, but man, as a share of their income, they pay a lot of taxes. When you think about all and I know this especially, when you think about all the fees and stuff, like in my state, to renew your license plates, it's over $100. I think it's $150 now. That's, $150 for your license plates. If you have, like I do, 4 or 5 beaters that you drive around, that's a lot of taxation because, I have to drive 4 or 5 cars because they're not always in the best state of repair. They contain, and they're also for different purposes. I have a pickup truck, I got a van, I got a car. And I have something else. What else do I have? I have several other vehicles, actually. But I only have like 3 or 4 that are ever insured. It's 4. Oh, and I have the SUV. SUV, a car, a truck, a van. And the newest one of those is 15 years old. Just so you know. These are not, these are the fancy cars I got from all the donations you've been sending. Thank you. Actually, one of them was donated by someone who listens to this study. So, So that's not unheard of. But in fact, all those cars cost me a total of $500 when I bought them. But the taxes on them every year and when I transfer them, much more. I mean, I paid more in taxes on those cars than I did ever on the cost. So rich should pay their fair share. And maybe that means a bit of a more, like as far as it goes, income, because the fees don't hurt them as much. Not that they need to be hurted per se, but it's like it's a way in which I contribute to the system that they don't contribute to the system as far as a percentage of my income. Whatever. I'm not against a little bit of progressivism on the income tax. You know, it'll stifle growth, but growth isn't everything. We got the poor to consider. I'm not against that. But again, hating the rich and coveting theirs and trying to be with confiscatory taxes, like when you start taxing things insanely into where you drive businesses and people out of your state, out of your country, it's foolish. You know, when the glory of someone's house is increased, someone's being paid to help build that. You know what I mean? So it's not. There's an interesting paradox that I think about sometimes, where that the Mises and the libertarians are kind of right. I mean, in this sense, like, and this is the truth that goes over all things, that the systems that are most free are going to prosper the most, and the systems that are most restricted are going to suffer the most. I mean, as far as the general suffering of the population and stuff is worse when the system is restrictive. And there was a book called When Nations Fail that talked about some of these factors in the fact that it's one of well, they made me kind of optimistic long term about China because of their lack of freedom, their innovation and stuff. They're always going to be copying. And if we just have a mind to, we can just start outdistancing them right now and we can beat them. I mean, it's not hard. Well, maybe it is late now. Maybe it is late. But again, the whole world was caught up in this foolishness, and they're also in trouble, and they have their own problems internally. So I don't really think that's something we got to worry about. I don't think like worrying about every part of the world is what this country really needs to do. People, we need to, because here's why the libertarians are right. That if you make people free and you let people just do a free market, it will create the most absolute wealth. People pursuing their own interests, their own covetousness, essentially. Pursuing profit. It will result in being free to do so. And the more you regulate that, the more it kind of cuts into all that. And the more you put in programs and social security and this stuff, it does dig into your profits, and it but also into the rate at which it grows, because it disincentivizes everything. Well, there's a paradox there, because it's like the prosperity of the world is the lifting of so many people out of poverty. This is something I've been watching serious, scientists and statisticians predict. Then the coming years, everyone was so optimistic before the pandemic about the future, because as the far-flung parts of the world began to take part in the prosperity that was trickling down essentially to all parts of the world from the big nations that are prospering, and as we become more crazily wealthy, other nations become not so horribly poor. Their poverty, though they may even become more, have even like a greater distance between the wealthiest and the least wealthy. There may be a greater and greater distance, but overall, they do get kind of dragged along for the ride because the society gets better. And again, like I said, there's a place for taxation and fairness in that. But the point is, the rising tide does raise all boats, though the boats don't get any bigger. Meaning you still stay pretty small overall. It's just the world you live in is better overall. The housing available to you, the resources and the jobs, the options improve with the modern world when you have, houses built on foundations instead of on dirt, and stuff like that. Well, that prosperity, as it goes to the rest of the world, was in the process of raising people out of poverty all over the world. It was a phenomenon of the past 40 years that was astonishing. But this pandemic will set a lot of that back. for many of those places. We don't feel it half as much here. And they sure aren't going to start talking about it right away because the news media was complicit and even not just, they were part of, like, they worked together with these bureaucrats and for God knows why. At the time, I felt like they were literally just, I had this feeling like this was just done to get rid of the then president. Like they were so upset about having a populist who was kind of out of control or something. I don't know. Again, that was kind of the point. What happens if we send a regular person who is not groomed for the position in? Oh, apparently they reject them, and you see what they did. So anyways, we have an interest in making the world prosper. Going out and working and doing your part in the world helps the world. So, like, it's a weird thing that like, the best thing I could do for the world, maybe it's just to innovate some new product and bring it to market and get rich. That's what I'm saying. It's not wrong for people to work hard and earn money. God never says don't work hard and don't prosper. But being prosperous has its own burden. It is hard for a rich man. As you get rich, and like I said, in America, the problem with America is the whole country is rich. It's hard to stay Christian when you're so... It's like I said, the hazard of our world is this availability of sin. And it's just so accessible. But I think I'm glad. I don't know. I don't know. My parents, when I think about what kids are exposed to these days in terms of pornography compared to what I was exposed to, I mean, it doesn't even compare. But just the potential. If parents aren't on guard, because you can guard against it still, but most parents don't or can't because of the situation they're in. Perhaps their kids are going to school. If your kids are going to school, they're exposed to pornography. You just accept it. You're going to have to talk to them about pornography before they see it. Just like I said, if your kids are going to school, you kind of have to talk a bit about, you don't have to go too nitty gritty about sex, but you got to talk about what the subject of sex is when they go to public school. Because that was the first thing I got struck with. For some reason, not in kindergarten, but in first grade. And maybe it wasn't like scheduled or anything. It just happened to be I sat next to the little girl who knew all the dirty jokes. I don't know. Explicit and explicit sexual dirty jokes. We have to be mindful of our soul. We have to be mindful of... It's funny, I thought we would be done with this chapter already. We're all a half hour. I meant to be done, but it's all right. These are good topics. It's all related to the same basic idea, which is we have to be mindful of heavenly things. Now, we shouldn't because like I said, are expected. We're put on this earth for a reason. It's not just to like study our Bible and pray and to hide in a hole. You know what I mean? And to wait out sin there until I'll go someplace, because a lot of times people are like, they go and isolate themselves. And, honestly, for a time, that is absolutely acceptable. If God calls you to go into isolation for a time, that's perfectly reasonable. But no one is going to be called to total isolation for their entire life. As far as that's too much for man to endure. But sometimes we need to be alone for a while, and so a period of isolation can be actually very productive, and it can be to meditate and pray. I try to isolate myself on a daily basis to pray and stuff and to think on the things of God, because it's not that you can't do it around other people, but you have to. It requires greater focus, and you're not as when you're alone, it's much easier to pray than it is when people are noisy around you and you're just silently in your mind. It's easier to focus. And so we know this. The dead don't take their riches with them. You can't take the pleasures of this world with you either, or any of those things. I equate this to the pleasures of this world, the praises of men, everything. You have your reward. The riches are the worst of all because it's like, at least with sex, you get the pleasure out of it. With money, you might just put it in a bank and never get to spend it. A lot of people They get rich, and the rich is that they have a lot of money. And I've noticed, and I've said this before, I've noticed a lot of times with people that I think are rich, I mean, they're just prosperous middle-class people, really. They're not rich people, like, truly rich. But they are, prosperous middle-class Americans. And the people who prosper very well and who are quite well-to-do, they tend to not spend money very much, and they sure are attracted to freebies. That's because that's the only thing. I just remember saying, it's free. I just remember how excited they were about the free breakfast. I was like, well, they must take every free breakfast they can. They've got a lot of money. But it's not untrue. Not that he was a bad person or anything in that, but it's like, there's a certain frugal way to do that. But you can't let it deceive you. It's its own special challenge. As I was really saying about all this, that money is its own special challenge. It's deceitful. When we have it, it's a responsibility. We have to, especially if that's our only gift. Think about pastors who really suck at preaching, but still make a lot of money at it, and they spend all that money on themselves. Boy, they got a swimming pool. I shouldn't say that because I didn't. The only pastor I know with a swimming pool, it came with the house, and it's not a fancy swimming pool. There's nothing wrong with having a swimming pool. I'd like to have a swimming pool, but I won't ask you to pay for it. All right. Then while he lived, he blessed his soul, and men will praise thee when thou doest well to thyself. While he lived, here's the thing: he did spend money on himself. That's what it means. He blessed his soul. This guy was rich and not afraid to spend money on himself. Like I said, prosperous middle class people tend to be frugal. The rich, when you think of someone who's rich, that's when you tend to get comfortable spending your money. Well-to-do, frugal people, probably giving nice chunks at church and all that. Nothing really wrong with that. But again, you have to, like I said, given that, you got to be doing something with your riches. Prosperous middle-class American, I know it doesn't seem like, I always feel like the same way. And I'm like, boy, man, I'm barely hanging on. Because we have such a high, to just have a lifestyle in America, you got to have a house and stuff and vehicles, because everything's built around that. Like I wouldn't even know where to obtain a horse, and I live in the country. I mean, I could look into it, but I mean, what I'm saying, like off the top of my head, I wouldn't be like, okay, I'll just go down to the stables and pick me up a horse. $500, here you go, cash money. I don't know what horses even cost. Probably more than $500 probably these days, yeah. Men will praise thee when you do well to yourself. When you do what? Well, you've done good for yourself. Look at this house. It's a nice car. You got such nice, you got the trophy wife. You will get praised for it. When you do well, and James talked about this too, even in church, man. If you look like money, they'll treat you better. And that's a fact, that's a fact. Like I said, some churches have like a dress code, and you gotta be careful because if you don't come in the right clothing, you may get a tongue lashing. He should go to the generation of fathers; they shall never see the light. There's no resurrection for them. Now there is that second resurrection that goes to the second death, right? But it's like that just means, it's like, that's not life. That's just the end. That's just the final. That's just the judgment. You get one die and then you go to the judgment. It's the second death, but it's really just continuation of the first. It's confirmation of what we already knew. And so in a sense, I don't know that you have to even see the second death unless God. The only purpose I could see of the final judgment is that for some reason that anyone who died thinking they were getting away with it, that the last thing they should know is that they didn't. And I don't know. I don't know if I care. If I know they didn't get away with it, that's good enough for me. You know what I mean? If I'm alive, and I, like it says in the book of Revelation, and I go out and I look at and I consider the carcasses of the men that transgressed against the Lord. You know? For the worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring to all flesh. You know, we're going to go out and look at them. You know, at least metaphorically, symbolically, or spiritually. Because we will truly see, you know, it reminds me of something that Jesus said. It's the opposite of what Jesus said. He said, you know, he that liveth and believeth in me shall never die. You know, they shall never see death. And I talked about how Jesus talks about, you know, there's these different sort of like taste death, see death. Because Jesus tasted death, right? But what's the difference if you were going to talk about, like, poetically, seeing death versus tasting it? Well, depending on the word for sight you use, it might imply, you know, actually entering into that fullness of what it means to be dead. Whereas tasting death, I think, has the poetic implication of just a bit of what it's like. And we shall taste death, but we shall never die, because God will raise us up. And Christ tasted death for every man, that we should never die. But they, you know, so that's like the seeing of light, but they shall never see the light. Though they walk right now, they have, you know, it's the light, they have it now. Or don't they? No, they walk in darkness. That's what the scripture says. They walk in darkness. I'm saying, you know, men can be held up in honor. Sometimes men are honored, but they don't have understanding. I'm saying that's like the beasts that perish. Like the beasts that perish. Like animals. Less than human. You know? God made man in his image to be made after his likeness. You know, he was made after his likeness. To be, you know, that was the point. Let us make man after our own image. But we are made out of the dust of the earth. Out of the same stuff as the creatures. And after the same pattern as the creatures. You know? We are so much like these beasts that men believe we come from them. You know? Because the same body plan, well, I should say, there's a similarity of body plan throughout many, you know, across the generations and evolution and all that, sure. I get it. And I don't even really care. Well, I find it interesting that, you know, there are people who are very... There's a man, David Berlinski, who's like an atheist, who's very skeptical about evolution, which always fascinated me. Because there is still... I can't help but being skeptical of it. Despite not having... I'm not like reflexively shutting my ears from listening to talk like that. Into different theories about, because what people think about it, what men are saying, is of interest, and also what exists as far as the testimony of nature and of you know, the interpretation of the data from nature is one thing, but there is just that it is right. When you there are certain facts of nature and of geology and stuff, like just things that are in the rocks that are just in. They are they're unmediated testimony, basically from God, of what's going on. How we interpret it, that can be a problem, but, you know, in any case, I don't think it's unreasonable to to at least consider what they have to say, because it is the way people think, and people's understanding is going to be informed by that. And also, it's based on, some people say, well, Satan has deceived them. I suppose. And some of it, if it's a reaction against Christianity, it's obviously, that's the purpose. But in as much as science is just honestly reporting what it finds, it's a useful tool. And so, we become more like, the more we do not use our higher functions, the things that make us more like God, the more we become like beasts. Without understanding, man is like a beast that perisheth. There's nothing higher about him, nothing nobler than that of a beast. That's your dark wisdom. Because they don't understand that death is inevitable. They may know that it's inevitable, but they're not living considering that in acknowledging God, because they hate God, because they don't like the world. But they kind of lie, because they do like the world. They like the pleasures of the world. They like the sins of the world. What they don't like about God is his strictures, and the fact that the world was made in which we have certain possibilities and stuff. And they want a world. Some people want a world with bumper pads all over the place to keep us safe from every single thing, so we could throw ourselves off the temple and the angels would bear us up in their wings. But God had thought such things. He did not see it fit to do any such things. He did not see fit. I should say see it fit. That's a funny thing to say. Psalm 50, let's read it. I don't know how, we're going to obviously finish this tomorrow, so we'll read it again first thing tomorrow. A psalm of Asaph, the mighty God, even the Lord, or a psalm of Asaph. I should clear my throat. The mighty God, even the Lord, hath spoken, and called the earth from the rising of the sun unto the going down thereof. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God hath shined. Our God shall come, and shall not keep silence. Fire shall devour before him, and it shall be very tempestuous round about him. He shall call to the heavens from above, and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice, and the heavens shall declare his righteousness, for God is judge himself. Selah. Hear, O my people, and I will speak, O Israel, and I will testify against thee. I am God, even thy God. I will not reprove thee for thy sacrifices or thy burnt offerings, to have been continually before me. I will take no bullock out of thy house, nor he-goats out of thy folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountains, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee, for the world is mine, and the fullness thereof. Will I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of goats? Offer unto God thanksgiving, and pay thy vows unto the Most High. And call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. But unto the wicked God saith, What hast thou to do to declare my statutes, or that thou shouldest take my covenant into thy mouth? Seeing thou hatest instruction, and castest my words behind thee, when thou sawest a thief, then thou consentest with him, and hast been partaker with adulterers. Thou givest thy mouth to evil, and thy tongue frameth deceit. Thou sittest and speakest against thy brother. Thou slanderest thine own mother's son. These things hast thou done, and I kept silence. Thou slanderest Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such an one as thyself. But I will reprove thee, and set them in order before thine eyes. Now consider this, ye that forget God, lest I tear you in pieces, and there be none to deliver. Whoso offereth praise glorifieth me. And to him that ordereth his conversation aright will I show the salvation of God. Now that conclusion verse, his conversation aright. Conversation in King James talk means behavior. And we'll look up the word in Hebrew to assure ourselves. But it means it's like he that sets his conversation aright, orders his life properly. Those are the people who are going to see the salvation of God. Those are the people who are going to be ready to receive and hear it. All right, hold on a second. Let me mute 1 second. All right. All right. It's kind of funny with this view. It looks like I'm like looking over a giant Bible. If I could somehow reverse the perspective so it was facing the other... Well, no, it looks like I should just turn the Bible around and I could be reading from it. That'd be funny. I could reach out and flip the pages. Anyways, enough of the goofiness. All right. So, I really like the Psalm. Asaph is another one of the authors of the Psalms. There's David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and then unknown. They're not all known. Who the ones that are post Hezekiah were possibly by someone during his time. There are psalms that could have been written by prophets. There may be a psalm of Isaiah that we don't know. Okay. So the mighty God, even the Lord again being, I often don't mention this, but that's YHVH, Yahweh, the Tetragrammaton, or when I grew up, I was taught to say Yahweh, but everyone says Yahweh. I question that because I heard from a person who was a practicing Jew that it was Yahweh. But practicing Jews won't say the name of God, so I wondered if he was being a bit deceitful with me. I don't know. But certainly it doesn't matter because I know God by the name of his son, Jesus. That's the name by which I know God. And it doesn't, and I know his name in Hebrew is Yeshua, but the way he came to me was in the name, as the English call him, Jesus, which is a very different than sounding than Yeshua from the Hebrew. But God speaks our language too. We being filthy Gentiles, and obviously of coarse tongues. All right, so he called the earth from the rising of the sun to the going down thereof. He's spoken and called the earth. From the rising of the sun going down thereof, you could look at that as east and west, but it probably means morning and night. Out of Zion, the perfection and beauty, God hath shined. That's where the word is coming out. That's where God has placed his name. Right? Beautiful for situation is Mount Zion, the sides of the north, the city of the great King, the city of our God. Our God shall come and shall not keep silence. A fire shall devour before him. It shall be very tempestuous around about him. God comes in tempest and fire. Christ comes. He's going to come in fire. Fire shall come down. In fact, at the end of the book of Revelation, at the end of the 1,000 years, fire comes down from heaven and devours the enemies of God. And so the fire also proceeds out of the mouth of the two witnesses. But there's also fire and smoke and all those things associated with God in many of the descriptions. And tempestuousness, especially when it comes in his wrath. And that's what this is talking about, God coming to judge. God coming to set things right. God coming to set the world right. We talked about in the last chapter, the death was the subject. And because this is what we have to consider. God is going to make, he's going to make things right. And quite frankly, that should make us consider and be concerned somewhat as human beings. Now, I shouldn't be concerned as a Christian. I should know that the blood of Christ covers me. I'm faithful to him. I trust him. And it says so. Trust God. Or what did it say? We'll get to it. But yeah, we know as Christians we should put our faith in Christ. And though having done so, that is salvation. And we just live it out from that point as saved people, as saints of God, as set aside as holy ones. We, with the help of the Spirit, we live our lives trying to live up to the calling we've been called with, the high calling of Christ Jesus. It's a calling to righteousness. It's a call to purity. It's a call to knowledge. And we go about trying to fulfill that. But our salvation comes from God. The Word has shined. The perfection of beauty, Christ shined out of Zion. That's where the Word of God came from. Where was he crucified? Jerusalem. He shall call the heavens from above and to the earth that he may judge his people. God is going to, and when he calls to the heavens, there's times where he says, I call heaven and earth to witness before you this day that you shall not prolong your days upon the land. That's something he says to them in Deuteronomy. So when he says he will call to the heavens from above and to the earth, because God is above the heavens, he will call them to witness, is what the implication, so he may judge. I mean, he needs to have witnesses for judgment. And the witnesses are the heavens themselves and the earth itself. Like I said, the earth is an unmediated testimony of God's handiwork, what he has done, what he has brought about. And the heavens also, they declare his glory. But also they are a kind of witness, at least symbolically, in that sense of God's going to judge. And the only things that are big enough to be witnesses to God's judgment are the heavens and the earth. Because the earth has soaked up all the blood. The blood of your brother Abel cries out to me from the ground. The earth has swallowed up, the earth that swallowed up all, the blood of saints. There's a lot of dead bodies. There's a lot of evidence on the earth. A lot of places where people hid the bodies and nobody's found it. A lot of people's loved ones disappeared over history. I mean, you think it's bad. We hear about kids. Can you imagine what the disappearing kid thing was like 500 years ago? 1,000 years ago? When people really had a much more lawless existence in some places? There's a lot of blood that needs to be avenged. And the heavens have seen it. It's all happened under heaven. But between the two of them, you get all the witnesses you need. Gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. And so he talks about those, he says, he's going to judge his people. Gather my saints, my holy ones, together to me. Those have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. We have made a covenant with God by sacrifice. What we've offered is God offered his son himself, and by faith we have laid claim to that sacrifice as for our sins. The heavens shall declare his right. Do you mean the Lord's righteousness? Or the righteousness of God's saints? It's his singular, so it's got to be God, right? Because we were going saints, they, to switch to his would be if he meant the saints, the psalmist is being very difficult with us right now. Yeah, so I think we have to think of that as God. The heavens shall declare the righteousness of God. It says the heavens declare his glory, but how shall they declare his righteousness? If they're for signs and seasons, I suppose they would declare, but when God fulfills those things and those things become evident what it all means, or that all things done under the heavens is being recorded by them, so to speak. I don't know. I don't know exactly what that means. But God is the judge. But the conclusion of that, the heavens shall declare his righteousness, for God is judge himself. He himself is judge. And the heavens shall declare his righteousness. Whatever. I'm not sure exactly how to, it's I don't know what to say on that. because it's obviously just it's mostly poetry. The heavens are being personified. The heavens don't really say, but they do say. The heavens declare the glory of God. The heavens declare the righteousness of God in a certain sense. If we know him, if we have understanding, we know this is true. Because all that God made was good. And all that is done under it is seen. And in a sense, that if the heavens are bearing witness and God is judging, well, there you go. The heavens bear witness. Well, this has happened. And God judges, right? Thou art righteous, O Lord. Whenever I see God being called righteous, it's in that judgment. Thou art righteous, O Lord, holy and true. For that when thou, this is Revelation 16. For thou hast judged, thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. Thou art righteous, O Lord, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. What is the verse out of that? 16. Let's back a bit. There we go. Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and wast and shalt be. That part. Because thou hast judged thus. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. But there we see God recompensing the evil for what they've done, the wicked. And that is, and the angel there declares him righteous. And I think the heavens declare the righteousness of God in that he is judging. He calls them to witness, and they witness, and they say God is righteous in his judgment. That's how that's together. That's what that's passage. That's what this is saying. And then comes the Selah, suspension. It's probably a good place we got a few minutes. I want to keep looking, actually. I'm going to keep going, because actually I feel like I don't want to stop just yet. We got 5 minutes. And it says, Hear, O my people, I will speak, O Israel, I will testify against thee. So he called his people, Gather my saints, my holy ones. Those that made a covenant with me by Sarah. Gather those who have covenanted with me. I'm going to judge them. The heavens will declare my righteousness. I'm judge. And he says, okay, I'm going to talk. I'm going to speak to you, O Israel. And this is, but again, as a Christian, we are grafted in. The church is Jew and Gentile together in one body, made one in Christ. God hath not cast off his people, but inasmuch as when he restores them, it is to that they will be restored, to Christ, to the church. That, as far as the nation, Israel being a nation, it won't be like, okay, when we restore Israel, we kick all the Gentiles out. That's not what God has in store for those who have been faithful to him, Jew or Gentile. But the Jews have their claim, and they're welcome to it. But it does not, this is not exclusionary of us. We have to give heed to it with a New Testament understanding. You have to be careful in the Psalms. Again, like I said, it's like, you understand, when someone's complaining, oh, God, why'd you forsake me? It's not necessarily the case. It's just what they feel. Don't confuse feelings for facts. Facts don't care about your feelings. Doesn't someone famous say that? Yeah, and facts and feelings are not they're not really, they're really not much of a relation there. I will not reprove thee for thy sacrifices, or the burnt offerings to have been continually before me. I'm not going to criticize your sacrifices, my people. Okay. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Well, because there are places where God does sort of say, like, he is critical of their sacrifices. And he is kind of here too. But he'll be like in Isaiah, he says, bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination to me. Your new moons, your appointed feasts, my soul hates. The blood of bullocks, there's a lot of, for all the animal sacrifice that is in the Bible, the Bible also spends a good amount of time criticizing it, even the Old Testament. Quite frankly, a lot in the Old Testament. The New Testament, it doesn't offer much of a critique of animal sacrifice, except to say that it is impossible for the blood of goats and bullocks to take away sin. I mean, it does talk about it a bit. I mean, there's definitely, Paul, goes into detail of like explaining how the new covenant changes the sacrificial system. But, so we have a covenant with God by sacrifice too. When he says, reprove thee, I'm over an hour now. I just hit it. All right. I just have to know reprove first. I can't. I almost shouldn't have gone to that verse, but let's see. Wrong psalm. We gotta go to 50. And let's just bring everyone along for the party. Just be a moment here. We'll finish up. Oh, himself to reprove. It says decide, a judge, prove. I wonder what I'm curious. Let's just try the New American Standard. I'm just curious what it's going to sound like. I'll test. I'm a God. I do not rebuke you for your sacrifices. So they go straight at that. Definitely. Like, I don't rebuke you for your sacrifices, and your burnt offerings are continually before me. I think what he's saying here is like basically this. I'm not rebuking you for your sacrifices, but the but is left out. It's kind of implied because everything he goes on to say is kind of like sounds like he's sort of poo-pooing their sacrifices because he does kind of poo-poo them a bit, right? I will take no bullock out of thy house, nor he-goats out of thy folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I'm not going to criticize your sacrifice, but I own it all. Did you know? It's all mine. You didn't give me squat. You never give me nothing, but you just give me of my own. That's what he's saying. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountain and the wild beasts of the field are mine. If I was hungry, I wouldn't tell you. I mean, maybe if I was hungry, I wouldn't tell you. The world is mine and the fullness. This might be just spoken in wisdom, but it sounds slightly rebukeful because he said, I'm going to enter into judgment with my people. He's saying, I own all this stuff. The world is mine. Do you think I really want these sacrifices? That's what he's saying. We make sacrifices for our sins. That's what the Old Testament sacrifices were for. There are other kinds of things like Thanksgiving, offerings that they would bring, other things, feasts they would celebrate. That all can, it's all relative whether God's going to be pleased with it or not. Because it has little to do with it has something to do with the quality of the sacrifice. It has to be perfect. But even a perfect sacrifice is not acceptable if God doesn't accept us. Meaning that our attitude, if our heart isn't right, if God has rejected us and we are not, coming before him, ready to receive him, and whatever that, if our ears haven't been open, if he hasn't prepared the way for us to receive him. So all this stuff, I rush through those verses, but really it's just saying, hey, I own everything. What are you going to give me? And he's saying, offer to me your thanksgiving. Because that's one thing I don't have much of is thanks. Something I could get, I'll take thanks, sure. Also because it's appropriate. Because here's the thing, sacrifice has to do with our sins. Thanksgiving comes forth from a heart that is thankful. God likes that much better than like, oh, I screwed up, what can I do to pay for it? You know what I mean? Like, when you give God a sacrifice for sin, That's like the kid who hits the baseball through the window and comes and pays for the window. Okay. But it was still, when the baseball comes through the window, you're still annoyed. And when he pays for it, you're like, that's only right. Right? But you feel very different about a kid who, let's say an old guy, he's sick, and the neighbor kid comes over and just mows your grass, offers, let's say, make sure they ask so that you don't, ruin anything. Does a nice job. Somebody who just does something good. Or somebody who shows appreciation even. Like the kid who pays for the baseball coming through the window is beneath the kid who sends a thank you card for a birthday present. Because as far as like, they're more annoyed with the kid who hit the baseball, even though they paid for it. What I paid for it, who cares? Yeah, but you broke my window. And why are you playing baseball right in front of my house like that? Especially because you keep breaking my windows and paying for it. Something like Dennis the Menace, but it's true. That's what sin is like. Offer thanksgiving and pay thy vows, but most especially, you make a vow, you better pay it. That's more along the lines of, well, it's not exactly breaking the window. It's like saying, Mr. So-and-so, I'll promise I'll do this for you. I'll go to the store and bring you some butter or whatever. Okay, son, or your neighbor's son, whatever. He's being condescending. Go ahead. And then he comes back with this thing. He did what he said. He paid his vow. He kept his word. Keep your word, especially to God. Jesus said, just do it all the time. He said, stop making vows to God. Don't swear. Swear not at all. Just let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Tell the truth all the time. Don't trot out vows. It's like, it makes you untrustworthy. If someone's like, every time, oh, I swear to God. It's like, what about all those times you aren't swearing? Are you just lying left and right? Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee, and thou shalt go. That's what he says. Hey, call upon me in the day of trouble. When you get in trouble, call on me. I'm not going to, you look at, you paid for your mistakes. I'm not going to criticize you, but just so you know, I don't need that. I don't need your bullocks and your that stuff. That's because you sinned. And I sure don't need the meat. But unto the wicked God saith, all right, we'll stop. And that's where it really changes. But that's the other side. It's like, look at the wicked. And again, there's a certain point at which there's the Israelites would offer sacrifices for the people, the priests, for the whole nation, and also people would bring for their individual things, for the things they've done. But some people didn't participate in that. They went and did their own thing, and wickedly, not peacefully, not, it says the Lord, out of every nation, those that love righteousness and fear God, whether or not they know God even exists, but they behave like they fear God. When someone is genuinely like that, I believe that God will, that's someone God has their eye on. Because I just can't, and he will reach out to them, I believe. So we'll continue in verse 16 again. To the wicked God said, we continued in 49:16 today. We're going to begin 50:16 tomorrow. Or Monday, actually. Isn't it Friday? Yeah, it is. Oh, it's Friday, isn't it? There we go. Well, Friday, yep. So we'll see you Monday. Thanks for joining me this week at this study. We'll be back again Monday to continue in the book of the Psalms.